What's up, guys? We played another game with the black pieces. They gave us a 2350 rating, which is always nice, but as you can see, there were some ups and downs. We were never worse, but we did give away our advantage here and there in some weird endgame ideas. So let's look at the game. It's against Bagabos 1880. Let's go. He opens up with d4. We go knight f6. He develops his knight, and I wanted to play something I've never played before, so I went g6. I have no experience with this. I wanted to try something new. I wanted to see what happens when you just go g6 and castle, in those King's Indian type structures, just to gain experience. So he pushes the pawn. I have no knowledge of this. Doesn't look like a particularly good move, but whatever. I just ignored it and kept developing. Now he develops his knight. Also weird because he didn't play c4. I don't know if this is an unknown thing, but I just ignore it. And I go d6, controlling these squares, getting ready to castle. He goes e4, taking the center. Now I could just castle or develop a piece, but I immediately go e5, and I'm saying that in these close centers, we can try to play the King's Indian structure where I rush your king side and you rush my queen side, but your knight's here and you don't have c4 in already, so I don't mind. And I figured if he en passant, I would develop my bishop. I didn't think he was going to do that. So I went e5, trying to play for the kingside attack ideas, but he did this en passant, and I recaptured, and now I think I'm just fine. It's a completely different type of game that I have no experience with, but it looks completely fine for black. So he gives me this check. I could block it with my knight or the pawn. I don't see the point of this check. I do the pawn just because. He goes back. I could have done the knight as well. Now I castle, and now he castles. My position is looking fine. I I can't develop the knight here because it hangs the pawn. And this pawn is, if I had to say one weakness in the black position, I would say this pawn since it's backwards. So I wanted to push it to get rid of my weakness. So I push it, and now I have the typical structure, which looks nice and solid, and now I can develop my knight. I thought he was going to take, and then I would take with my knight. Maybe he takes, maybe I take with my bishop, and then maybe he goes c4, something like that, and it would be even game. I'm fianchettoed, and we'll see what happens, but he didn't. He pushed. I didn't think this was good because he doesn't have support from his pawns. So I move my knight, which was under attack, and now this is hit twice. And it's not so easy for him to defend it because I can keep adding attackers. So he moves his queen up, hitting my knight and defending the pawn. I develop my last minor piece, which hits the pawn a third time, and also there are c5 ideas I was looking at, hitting the queen, kicking it, which removes the defender. So he defends it with the bishop. I was looking at c5 here to see if it worked, but I also saw c5 in the long run gave that square to his pieces, the b5 square. I could play a6, but I didn't see a need to play c5 right away when I could keep adding attackers instead. So I went queen c7, adding yet another, a fourth attacker. And it's kind of like the Budapest where you throw your knight to g4 and you can always add so much pressure you win your pawn back. So now he thinks he's going to lose his pawn. So he goes knight g5, hitting the bishop and attacking my knight. So he's trying to be tricky here, but I just ignore him and say I was attacking this pawn to begin with. I'm going to remove my knight from here and take the pawn. Now, some people might be scared of this, but you have to understand that I can move my queen at any moment because it's so protected. This knight is protected three times and attacked twice. So I can move my queen and the knight's still fine. So what does he do? He takes the bishop. I recapture. Now I'm up a pawn. The central pawn. My rook is opened. I really like my position. If I can untangle this and push e5, I'm definitely just way better. So he moves his queen here out of my own discoveries that I had on his queen. But still, it's only hit twice. So I want to resolve my own pin. So I go out of the pin and hit his queen because I'm up a pawn and my center's better. So queen trade can't be bad for me, right? He ignores me and develops a rook. This pawn is hanging, and you probably can definitely take it because c2's hanging after that, and this knight is loose combined with this bishop. But I said I'm up a pawn, my center's better, and I can trade queens here. So I could trade queens. So queen takes queen, bishop takes. Yeah, his bishops are nice, but I can go like, I don't know. I was looking for a place to put this knight so I can push e5 through. It doesn't actually have that many good squares. Can't go here. This ruins your structure. You can't go here. You can only go to f7. But after like bishop g4, yeah, it's not as super easy to convert, but it's still fine. So I went for it, but he didn't take with the bishop with that nice idea. He took with the pawn, ruining his structure. Yeah, it opens up the f file, but so what? I'm already there. It's not, and now you have an extra weakness. I didn't mind this at all. And now I'm trying to figure out how the heck do I push e5? Like, I wish this knight wasn't here so I could push e5 right now and then e4. But this knight, I definitely don't want to go here because of this. Um, and it has no good squares. I don't want to go to f7, even though you could go at f7 here and play e5 next. It's an idea. But instead, I went knight c5 because this seemed like a good active square, and I seemed like I can reroute this one here and push it through. He retreats the bishop, opening contact with the rooks and just solidifying slightly. I take his rook. Um, I wanted to keep his rook off of the d file because the f file has no infiltration. It doesn't actually do anything there. And I wanted it off the d file. What was the reason? It was, oh yeah, because it was, I wanted to like throw a knight here at some point, and because he was x-raying it, he would have some weird idea. I forget exactly what it was. There was a reason I didn't want his rook on the d file. Something maybe with pushing. I don't remember, but I do remember there was a reason. So I go b5 here. I feel like it's just a strong move. Um, Controlling the light squares, making sure my center doesn't come under attack ever. And this pawn mass looks really just powerful compared to this teeny weeny guy. He goes b4, and my idea was, yes, to go after this a5 and just gain as much space and control as possible. So he stops that idea with b4, kicking my knight, which is fine. I go back to b7, which is a good square. It prepares a5, which didn't need preparation, but it's actually good to be able to recapture with it. It also has access to the d6 square, so it's just a good circuit now. And White's struggling to find things to do. His bishops doesn't have anything. He can't go here unless he trades dark squares, which is crazy. So he pushes this pawn, this poor lonesome guy, and it opens the diagonal to the king. It doesn't really threaten anything because I could just recapture. I should completely ignore it probably and go, let's say knight d6. He takes, I take, and then I can plant my knight in there. Um, but instead, I went with this knight in here with the idea, if he takes, no problem. If he doesn't take, I can push through this pawn, kick the knight, and then get in like an e5, which I've been trying to get. So I finally move my knight off of the square. Maybe there's an e5 in my future. So I go here, but he of course takes, and I of course take. And now I still have this block of mass in the center. I'm still up a pawn. I still have a good bishop that's now threatening this knight. And his bishop's not hitting a single thing. He takes my pawn. Now here his knight is hanging, and I have 2 minutes on my clock. And he takes a pawn. And I saw what he wanted. I saw he wants that if I take the knight, he's going to take another pawn, hitting my knight. My knight can't go to these squares because they're all covered. It has to go to d8, right? So takes, knight d8, hitting the pawn. Pawn can move because it's defended. Or instead of moving, it can immediately be defended by b5. And these pawns, plus this protection, plus the bishop, it's kind of scary. I figured that I didn't like the look of c takes d. Something about it just looked weak. Maybe it's holdable, but I wasn't thrilled with it. E takes d, I like more. It just looks more solid. Um, yeah, E takes D is probably the solid move, but I wanted to call this guy's bluff, and even though I knew it would be hard to defend if I wasn't accurate, I decided to go for it anyway. I took the knight. He took here. I dropped my knight back. He protected. And now I'm like, I gotta somehow do something. Like I don't know, but I need to break this down. I'm up a piece. I need to just not lose. I throw in a check. He blocks with the bishop. Now here, I should have played e5. I was worried about if he takes and I recapture, he can go something like rook f4, but I could always go knight e6, and if rook e4, I could go king f7. So I guess that holds. Hmm. Yeah, I guess it holds. It's still tricky because without perfect calculation, you never really know if these are going to push through or not. And the knight's kind of clumsy, and this square is not open for it to do this. So I trade, which is not as accurate. He took with the king, which was weird. This gave me a second to be able to put my king, because it's no longer cut off by the rook. So I copied it, and I shifted over, because if my king can help, then I'll feel a lot better. But even so, if his rook infiltrates, he wins pawns. It's very tricky. I knew this was going to happen, but with 28 seconds on my clock, you can't resist this stuff. So king comes, and he's going to take this pawn, and I wasn't sure what to do. I was thinking of, I have 28 seconds. I was thinking of attacking the pawn, but the king will just defend it. I figured if I'm going to lose this pawn, I might as well have his king as far away. So I pushed it, which is kind of funny. And he took it. So now if I go here and he goes here, it'll be my move again. So it's just funny. But instead I played a6, immediately undermining both pawns. I need to break this down. Unfortunately, he has a4. If he didn't have a4, it would be great for me. But he has a4. Still I take. It opens up my rook and removes one of the pawns. So now again I have to try to break this down, but I have no pawn here to do it. They're connected past pawns, super dangerous, and I can easily lose this game. So I'm trying to think how to prevent these pawns from pushing. So I go rook c8, which seems like a move that prevents both pawns from pushing. So I feel like, okay, for 1 second I'm stabilizing. The knight covers this rook entry square, so maybe I can get my king in or something. If I figured if I can win these pawns, there's no way I will feel amazing. So moves forward with his king. And at this point, I realize there's no way to break down the pawns. I'm not going to get in with my king, and there's nothing for me to do except wait to die. Because if I let him get in c4, then he's going to have all the time in the world to improve his position, and I'll just be stuck, like moving my knight around or something. So, with 24 seconds on my clock, I said, fine, I'll give back the material, and it'll have to be a draw, or very drawish. Because it's just not good. Like my knight isn't here on b6 blockading him. It's on d8, and it has no way to reroute without moving this pawn. It just looked really bad. So I took, and now material's even. I'm not worse, and I come with a threat. Fine. He defends the threat. I throw in a check. I figure whichever way, he'll likely go in front, um, which gives me access to here. He went this way, which is weird, but I guess he wanted to bring the rook here and win a pawn. I said I'll let you do that. So basically, he'll come in, I'll win a pawn, he'll win a pawn, I'll go to the side. Um, he'll bring his king in, I'll win another pawn. He'll check me, I'll go up, he'll win. Well, he can't win another pawn. I wasn't worried because this is very active. And even when your opponent's up a pawn in these endgames, it's still a draw. So he goes passive and defends it, which I really didn't mind. I'm also noticing his king is completely cut off, except for these two squares. I go g5, taking away this square. Now his king only has this square. He goes h3, I guess so he can move this pawn without hanging the h-pawn. And again, still should be a draw, but I'm going to slowly improve my position, and maybe he'll make an inaccuracy. Yes, he's 1900, but lots of people in endgames, including myself, every move looks equally good. Every move looks like it makes sense, and half of them are losing. So I go h5, just getting as close as I can to the other side of the board. He pushes. Again, I'm not trying to trade because even though it should be a draw no matter with good play, I still want as many advantages in case he makes a mistake. So I go h4 thinking, okay, now if I ever win the h-pawn, I'm a lot closer to queening. So he has to not lose that pawn. And the thing is, I'm actually threatening to go rook h2 next move, and he can't defend that pawn. So the only way to really defend it is to go rook h1 immediately. And although it doesn't look good, I'm not entirely sure how to make progress there as black. I guess get behind the pawn, forcing the king. Then we move our king up. Maybe. But he moved his king back, which boggles my mind. Don't know what that's about. I immediately go attack this pawn. He pushes. Now he's going to get the rook behind it, and he's also very close. But I calculated that my king can get here in time. So I take the pawn. He goes here. I don't immediately block the pawn. I go here first because I calculate that I have enough time. He pushes. Now I should go here, right? So that I can get in front of the pawn. But I actually made a mistake, and I took here with check. Now I saw that when I take with check, yes, he can attack my rook with tempo, but I can just give him another check with tempo. And when he moves his king, I can again just go here. And what's the problem? I win a pawn. How could it be worse than not winning a pawn and blockading? But it turns out that winning the pawn is way worse and gives up my advantage because of something like, how'd it go? When you go to blockade the pawn, he attacks this one. I don't remember the line. There was some ridiculous line that the computer showed that made the opening of this drawish all of a sudden. It's way too advanced for me, especially with 30 seconds on my clock. It would be very impressive if a human found all that anyway. They would have to understand the ideas too. So anyway, I took. He goes forward, and now his king actually has no legal moves, which is funny. But I'm not worried. I can make progress easily. Now, if I push my pawn or move my rook, he goes here and I lose the game. So I immediately have to go king d8, giving up this pawn, but it's not a big deal. I'm up a pawn, but look at the construction. With my king here and these pieces here, it should be easy for me. So I blockade immediately. Now all I have to do is worry about these pieces. He's attacking my rook and my pawn. I defend them both. He moves his rook up. Doesn't really do anything. All I have to do is push my pawns. This rook defends this. Just push right down the carpet. He stops the pawn. I push the pawn. He goes here. I don't know what that does. It doesn't even threaten this. And then, of course, I block. If he had gone in front of the pawn, I would have just walked this one up so that this is protected and then done that. But now I can do it immediately because he can't take this pawn. He does give this meaningless check, but I get a queen. And for some reason, he played it out. So that's that. Another good game with very few mistakes. Um, Meaningful mistakes, anyway. And now we're at our all-time highest rating of 1983. So, and that was with an opening we've never played before. So maybe in addition to Budapest, I'm going to throw this in. Kingside Fianchetto ideas and see what happens. We keep going. We're almost at 2000. Hope you enjoyed.